Welcome to the Visibility Project podcast.
Welcome to the Visibility Project podcast.
Welcome to the Visibility Project podcast.
Started by a group of citizens in a small Michigan town with a like-minded goal
of increasing the visibility
of the unseen and unheard populations in our community.
Our guests will share stories and insights
with the goal of increasing our awareness and knowledge
of various aspects of diversity and equity
to create a more connected, empathetic, and inclusive community.
So, let's get to work.
Let's get to work.
So let's get to work.
So, let's get to work.
Let's get to work.
Welcome to the Visibility Project podcast. I'm your host, Jeremiah Lee. In today's episode, we will be talking with two guests who will share their stories of adoption. Jenna Griswold and Delois Leapheart will discuss their personal stories and expertise with us today. Jenna is from Bay City, Michigan, and has been married to her husband Bryon since 2018. She has two daughters. Her stepdaughter, Harmony, is 13, and their adopted daughter, Zoey, is 6. Jenna notes that however motherhood comes to you, it is a miracle, and she continues to share her adoption journey in hopes of igniting a spark in others' hearts. Delois is the founder of Adoption Option Incorporated. She first became licensed to practice law in the state of Indiana in 1982 and has practiced law in the state of Michigan since 1983. She has published several articles on topics such as adoption and business law. With the help of a talented group of employees, contractors, volunteers, collaborators, and donors, she endeavors to help improve the lives of children and families, primarily in the Great Lakes Bay region and mid-Michigan area. Well, welcome Delois and Jenna. I'm so happy to have you both here and excited to hear more about your stories. So welcome.
Thank you. Nice to see you too.
Thank you. I'm so grateful to be invited.
Well, welcome. So I'm very excited about this. And today I want to start off with you, Jenna, and I want to hear all about your story of adoption, because I think your story, right, you have for multiple avenues, right? So can you tell us more about your story of adoption? I know it's multifaceted, right? So.
I was 2.5 years old when I was adopted by my father, Tim, and ever since then, he's always been the guy that stepped up to the plate and my rock. And when I was 13 or 14, my parents started they were the house that all the kids went to. So we've always had multiple kids in and out. And when I was 18, they decided to start fostering. And they probably had 15 kids between respite and permanent placement that were in their home that kind of became part of the family. It was, if one kid comes in, they could be there for 3 or 4 days, but no matter what, they still call my mom and dad, have that relationship built. And when just 4 years ago, my parents did a foster to adopt situation. So the child was placed in their care and then they decided to adopt him. He was 10, his name was JC, and he has now been our brother, like he never, wasn't in our lives since 2017. And last year, in February of 2021, my husband and I decided that we were also going to foster. And it was kind of a whirlwind of how it happened. We didn't really plan on adopting right away. So our license was approved in March and they called us April 26th to take a foster care placement. Our daughter was 4 and she moved in with us full time in June, and it was an instant love relationship. It was like we met her and we just knew. And she was adopted December 17th of 2021. And she has been, it's kind of like one of those situations where a kid comes into your life and you can't remember what it was like before them.
Right. And so you've had all 3 of these experiences. You were adopted, your family is adopted, your parents have also adopted other children recently as well. So that's wonderful. Can you tell me about why you and your family, I know that your personal experiences, so that's probably made some influence on you, but can you tell you why you decided to adopt and how you knew that adoption was the right choice for you as a family?
It's kind of a sad story, so I don't want anybody to, get upset about it, but my husband and I got married in 2018 and tried for a while to conceive, and just never happened, never knew a reason why. And we decided when it wasn't happening anymore that we were going to try a different route. And we sat down in December of 2019 and just kind of talked with our first worker about the process of fostering, and realized, you know, my dad always said, blood doesn't make you family. It's the love that you have. And that was just kind of like when we knew. And I figured it would be kind of a difficult experience coming from a maternal side, not having that bond with that child. But like I said, each kid is different. There's kids that we've met that, you know, it's not that right placement, not only for you, but for the child too, because you have to find the right family for them where they're going to thrive and grow.
Right.
And it was like when we met Zoey, it was totally, I mean, we knew my husband, as soon as we got in the car, looked at me and he said, I didn't even want to give her back. So we decided that was our route to take. Just, you know, God kind of opened that door and our church was behind us. And then it was kind of like what we call a God wink. But we prayed about it, and all of a sudden we got a call a week later, and I was like, yes,
That was that.
God's going, do it. Just
That's incredible. Well, thank you so much for sharing. And it's great. And I want to circle back to you, Jenna, and want to hear more about, you know, the whole process for you and what it was like for you growing up and all those. But I do want to hop over to Delois now and also hear a little bit of your background now at Delois too. So can you tell us more about Adoption Option and the organization, and what motivated you to start this organization? I guess we'll start there.
Well, it's such a privilege and such a blessing to have this organization in this community. The community has been so supportive. My route to founding the agency, I'm going to go with Jenna and say it was not something I planned. That was a God thing. In fact, when I said to my husband, I think God's calling me to found an adoption agency, his reaction was, I haven't heard that. But we talked about it and we prayed about it. And again, it was just a blessing how things came together. We went to volunteers who were willing to be on that first board of directors, and shared with them what had happened to me in 2002 when I went into a seminar where I first heard 3 letters put together that changed the trajectory of my life. At no point did I envision me starting an adoption agency, but when I heard those 4 letters, MARE, it's a website. Michigan Adoption Resource Exchange. It wasn't a website back in 2002. Back in 2002, it was a book that was published monthly and sent to the libraries. And they had pictures of children whose parental rights had been terminated and they were available for adoption, but no adoptive home had yet been found. And that puzzled me because there were so many in 2002 existing, wonderful, incredible, effective adoption agencies in the state of Michigan. I just couldn't even figure out how there could be, on average, of 300 to 400 kids per month whose parental rights are terminated and they're available for adoption and no family had been identified. So I said, just send me the book. Just send me the book. I'll
Sure.
look at it. I don't know what I could do, because at the time I was a private practicing attorney. So I could be a guardian ad litem in an abuse neglect proceeding. But once the parental rights were terminated, that went to a nonprofit adoption agency. And I wasn't a nonprofit, I was a for-profit law practice. And so the book kept coming and I kept looking at these pictures of children. And from 2002 to about 2003, I looked at those pictures thinking, how can I help? And finally, I just filed the incorporation papers because they had told me that as a lawyer, I couldn't do the adoption for foster children. And that's kind of a dangerous thing to tell lawyers, you can't do something. And so the only way to do it was to incorporate and file a nonprofit, create a nonprofit agency. And so that's how it began, with a little dream of helping kids get out of foster care.
Well, that's incredible. And how many children, I guess, have you over the years since 2003? Is that right, Delois? Since you started?
Oh, I'm
Oh,
so glad you asked that
Yeah.
question. It is in excess of 389. We're coming in this year, closing in on 400 children.
Wow.
Before the year is out, it will be 400 children. And that is something that we have an amazing staff to do. That's not the founder, that is a team of professionals. So whether it's the licensing family that comes in, like Jenna did, coming in to do foster care, or whether it's the family who then says, I want to adopt, they sign a document that says, I want to adopt, or whether it's our adoption professionals that walk them through the process. So we have an entire staff dedicated not only to adoption, but to other services also that are different than adoption.
Excellent. And I know that we're probably going to get there, but could you talk to me about what some of those services for your organization are?
Sure. We work collaboratively with the Michigan Department of Health and Human Services, whom I refer to as MDHHS. And so when they are asked to investigate potential abuse or neglect, they do a report. The Child Protective Services Department does a report. And based on that report, a decision is made as to whether or not the child is removed from the home and placed in foster care. So if that child is removed, they might call us to say, hey, can you work with the birth family on parent education? Because the MDHHS's number one goal is anytime a child is removed, their number one goal is to return the child home. But that's not always possible. And
Right.
so when the evidence indicates that's not in the best interest of the child, then adoption services become available. So we offer services to families who want to help their child come home. We offer services to families who want to adopt a child. We offer both types of services. In addition to that, some children are teenagers and they say, look, I know I can't go back and live there, but I want to stay connected to my family, my birth family. And so we offer services to those teens that help mentor them until their time in foster care ends. In addition to offering mentoring services, we also offer services that are family team meetings. So because more than one professional agency might be helping a family, you might have mental health. You might have someone who is involved in counseling. You might have someone who is involved in the adoption. You might have a different agency involved with the foster care. Sometimes they need to have what's called a family team meeting, and we provide and facilitate those services. So we do a lot more than our name says, because at the end of the day, it's just about helping improve the lives of children and families.
Well, it's incredible work. And it sounds that, like you said, it's not just the adoption piece. There's a lot there. So it's incredible the amount of work that you and your team do. I want to hear now, I'm going to dig a little bit more in depth, and I want to hear maybe some what's a heartwarming and unique story about adoption that maybe, I'm going to ask this to both of you. I'd love to hear your experiences too, Jenna. Or maybe on top of that, maybe you could tell us your favorite success story. But really, what's something heartwarming and unique about adoption that you both feel? And maybe you have like a favorite success story on top of that. So I'll open that to both of you and see what you feel is really unique about adoption and maybe some success stories that you've had in the past.
I'll let you go first, Delois.
Well, that might be a mistake because my favorite story depends on the department. If it is a youth and transition program, my favorite story is the moment where we look at the interest survey of the potential mentor and we compare it with the interest survey of the teen in foster care. And the worker assesses those two documents and concludes, you know what? I have a match. I think this is going to work. So my favorite story in YIT is when we have a match and we watch a mentor and a youth grow in their connection as the mentor is teaching the youth in foster care, the teen in foster care about life skills, because one day their foster care will end. If I'm talking about family preservation, my favorite moment is when I get a letter from a client that says, you know what? That worker was a light, a candle in my darkness. I was in a place where the court removed my children because I wasn't prepared to parent at that time. but working with your parent education worker, or working with your parent visitation support worker, we have grown and learned so much from that curriculum you were teaching or the time we spent with the worker, that we have now convinced the judge that it's time for our child to return home. Of course, if it's licensing, I don't care whether it's, as Jenna said, the licensing type of family that's going to do respite, or the licensing type of family that's going to care for the child on a longer term basis. My favorite moment is when that child comes into the home and that family lays eyes on them and they begin their journey of nurturing. And that nurturing continues until there is either a moment where the judge returns the child home, or there's a moment where the judge says this child's available for adoption. And then, of course, in adoption, my favorite moment is that hearing that says, this is over. This journey has ended from a legal perspective. But you know why it's ended? It's ended because from a psychological perspective, you guys are already a family and we're just catching up with you and signing off the paperwork. And then the judge says the magic words, I am hereby signing this order that creates a legal connection in this family as though this child was born to you. And that's when I get the goosebumps, because now the judge recognizes, the law recognizes, the state of Michigan recognizes that you're a family, as though this child had been born to you.
Well, Delois, I gotta say, that's the moment when I get goosebumps too, because you gave me goosebumps as you're saying it, right? This is such an incredible moment, and I can only imagine that, like, the joy that you and your team have once, like, the helping support the families through those
Well,
moments.
it is the culmination of a lot of hard work.
Oh yeah, I bet.
The family has done a lot of work. Jenna can tell you they've gone through completing lots of documents. Those documents were sent to the state of Michigan, and a whole separate group of people looked at them to see if they thought this was a good match. Once the state of Michigan consents, now we've got to file separate documents with the court. Once that's done, then if the family wants a hearing, we have a hearing. So there are a lot of stages and a lot of parties working really hard to get to that moment.
That makes a lot of sense. Jenna, I want to pass it off to you now and hear about your favorite success stories, or what do you feel is so heartwarming and unique about adoption too, from your personal perspectives of going through this?
So my first worker, Amanda, she works with Delois, was by far the biggest blessing in our entire, what ended up being 7.5 months of trying to get to that stage. And something was said to me that she said, I wrote it down. A child born to another woman calls me mom. The depth of the tragedy and the magnitude of the privilege are not lost on me. And that kind of hit, because before she was placed with us, like I said, that connection would have been, I thought, hard to forge. But when you have a child that comes into your house that's broken, and you can't even fathom how somebody could do some of the things that they do to these children to get them to this point. My biggest success story biggest moment was when my daughter, I'm just referring to her as my daughter, Amanda came in and she was trying to understand the paperwork, because there is a lot, like Delois said, a lot of paperwork.
I can only imagine.
A lot of signing. And Zoe couldn't understand why she could call me mom and Bryon dad, but the school didn't call her that. And we had to say, oh, honey, it's paperwork. We got to file all the paperwork. And Amanda took her the time to make special papers with Zoe's name on them, so that when she came to the house to have us sign our final paperwork to submit to the judge, Zoe had papers to sign that said, do you want this to be your mom? Sign here. And going from a child, when we first got her, who couldn't write, who couldn't read, who didn't know how to spell her name, couldn't recognize letters, to then 6 months later signing her first name on a piece of paper saying that she wanted us to be her parents.
So sweet.
By far my favorite memory.
So wonderful. So sweet. That's incredible. So the success stories make my heart like bound, but Can you all tell me now, and I'm going to start with you, Jenna, on this as well, but I'd love to hear from you as well, Delois, but can you all tell me what's something that people generally don't know or don't understand about adoption that you wish they knew?
You cannot go into this without a heart that is willing to do anything and everything for that child.
Sure.
Because if you don't have that, if you don't have that ability to open up, and guess what, even if they're a foster respite, for that time that that child is in your house, they are your child.
Right.
You can treat them no differently, because guess what? Those kids understand that. They know more than we imagine. We think, oh, they're just kids. Oh, my daughter was 4 when she came to our house. And I can tell you from the moment believe me, she's a Spitfire. She really is. And she had our hats off quite a few times. But if you're going to go into this thinking that there's any other gain other than having a place in a child's heart for the rest of their lives, then you're doing it for the wrong reasons.
Sure, that makes sense. Delois, I want to ask you the same question. What's something that you think that people just generally don't know or understand that you'd like people to know?
I love what Jenna said, that you've got to be there for the right reason, because some foster parents are here for the long haul, and some foster parents are hoping to adopt, and some foster parents are only are doing it for a short-term period of time, which we call respite care, or another word for it would be temporary care, or another word for it would be emergency care. So no matter what type of foster parent, Jenna's absolutely right. Number one has to be the child. Whether you're going to keep that child for 2 weeks, 2 months, or 2 years, the focus has to be on how do I help that child grow and thrive. Another thing about adoption is people often don't realize there's more than one type. So your neighbor might have adopted a child from Ethiopia. Well, that's called an international adoption. Or your other neighbor might have adopted a child who was in foster care. So that's the primary type we provide at Adoption Option Inc. Another neighbor may have adopted a child directly from the hospital and either met or did not meet the birth mom or birth parents. That's called a direct placement, or an infant typically adoption. Another neighbor might have adopted a child as a result of mom and dad had a child, and let's say they're no longer married or they never were married, and now mom has married someone, her forever sweetheart, that considers this person's child, which is not their biological child, but they're marrying someone who has a child and they want to be that child's parent. And the other parent is either okay with it or not in the picture. That's called a step parent adoption. And there are different legal procedures depending on whether it's a step parent adoption or a foster care adoption or an international adoption. So when you say adoption, people just think of, oh, there's only one kind. No, there's actually different kinds and different procedures. In fact, there's even one called adult adoption.
Great. Thank you so much. Yeah, it's great to hear that there's so many different types. And really, I'm sure a lot of people aren't aware of that. I want to ask a kind of a follow-up, maybe similar question to this to both of you too. Do you think that there are some common myths or misconceptions that you'd like to highlight that people hear, and maybe these misconceptions people have beyond what we've already covered?
When you start talking with the adoption worker, you're thinking, okay, I want to adopt, and that's about my want. And really, adoption is about what's in the best interest of the child. So we want to make sure when we do an adoption that we look at the family assessment about what are the needs of the family? What kind of child could they adopt and be successful? And then we want to look at the needs of the child. What kind of parents, based on this child's unique characteristics, would likely be successful parenting this child? And then if those two line up, that's when we propose to the state of Michigan a match. And if the state of Michigan agrees, that's when they send us a consent that says they agree to this adoption. So the number one myth is that it's about what I want.
Sure.
If you're an adoptive parent, as Jenna said, it's about what's in the best interest of developing and helping to grow and thrive this child.
That makes absolute sense.
Oh,
And Jenna,
I got a good one.
yes,
Sorry.
please. No, absolutely.
I think that another really big myth, like when we went into it, was hearing somebody say to get your foster license to adopt. Because if you go in and you get your foster care license and your only thing you want to do is adopt a child, guess what? That's not the right, your heart's not in the right place, because foster care is all about reunification.
Yeah.
So you have to be willing to take a child and nurture and love it until their parents are healthy again, to love them, to give them back. And I know most people kind of look at it like, oh, well, I can get around things this way. And I'm not gonna lie, my husband and I looked at it that way too. But you have to be willing to work with the birth family and the workers for reunification, not just to go into it in a child's place in your home and you think, oh, I'm gonna adopt this kid. It's not the way it works.
Sure, that makes
That
sense.
is so true, because there are children who need homes, and in order to care for them, you have to be willing to love them on a temporary basis. And that sounds so hard, because once you get attached to a child, you're thinking, oh, I don't ever want to let this child go. But, if you really want to see that child grow and thrive, if the court concludes that child is ready to go home, that parent is ready to parent that child safely, then it's in your best interest to support that.
Sure.
And so I have, my favorite myth buster is we have had several parents speak at different occasions about what it's like to take a child in your home, become attached, and then that day when the judge says the child is going home, the families stay involved. That's the very best, is that not only is that child going back home where they came from, but the foster family stays with them, not in
cool.
literally, but stays connected to them. The foster family stays connected to the family. So the birth family has a resource. That's wonderful when that happens. So foster licensing is opening a door for you helping a child. How long you're going to help, whether you're going to help a child that ends up adopted in your home or not adopted in your home, that's not the point. It's, are you committed to helping this child?
That makes so much sense. And I want to go back to something you both touched on briefly here. Like, Jenna, you mentioned that a lot of people just don't know what everything goes into it as you as a family. And, everybody doesn't really understand. But what are some challenges, I guess, that you have experienced personally about adoption that maybe people don't know about? That what are some challenges that you wish people knew? Those things that you said, you mentioned it, right? People don't know everything that goes into it. What are some of the challenges, I guess, from your experience?
One of our main, I think the biggest challenge was the school system.
I see.
You're not the parent. And my daughter had a lot of issues because you're taking kids, that are coming from broken past and bounced around all the time, and they have no real stability, and they have some of them, have no idea how to even behave in a social setting. So one of our biggest challenges was the school, because, you had to jump through so many hoops just to understand, why your kid did something that day. It's like, well, at this point in time, if I'm picking her up, I need to know why.
Right.
Why you're wanting her picked up, what's going on. This isn't going to be a, call. And I will say, and if Delois, I'm sure she's heard my name multiple times through the ages.
Not at all. Not at all. Not at all.
I was referred to by one worker as intense, intimidating, and passionate. Because the school
I would take all of those as compliments.
I am, because, and I had
Absolutely.
one school worker look at me and say, well, you're just her foster parent. She's just your foster child. And I went, okay. I said, well, you go tell her that then, because that little girl looks to me every day.
Absolutely.
And I think that people, the challenges that you go through, it's kind of like some of them are just working against you. there's so many hoops you have to jump through, paperwork, and it's the biggest challenge too is winning them that trust, building it, because the littlest thing, the little inconsistencies, that's what they look for. The kids look for you to just promise one time that you're going to take them somewhere and then you don't, and that is their reason to just close off completely again. So that's why, like, when I say, like, your heart has to be in it, everything that you say to that child, you need to be willing to know, like, this is what I mean. I'm going to follow through, and you have my word. And that goes for loving them too. And that's the biggest challenge, is you're working against children who have been beaten down, emotionally by quite a few, people in their lives that can't trust. And sadly, the workers like Delois' agency, I thank God for them, because that is most of the time the most consistent person in that child's life are those workers. And that's who they trust.
Well, Adoption Option is a nonprofit, so I don't own the agency. I'm just one of those people doing my best to help kids along with our adoption staff. And I just couldn't agree with you more. These children need an advocate, not some timid person who's going to shrink back when their child needs resources. And so those names that you were called are the description of an ideal foster parent. 100%. Someone who's willing to take on whatever systems need to be tackled, whether it's getting mental health services, whether it's getting the child medical services, whether it's getting dental services, whatever services that child needs, there's a system. And that system was set up to serve kids that are in the home of their parents, and to come in and fill out a form that's filled out by parents. And nowhere on the form does it say anything about foster parents. So you are in a system that wasn't designed for you to advocate for your child. So if you don't have that tenacity, if you don't have that temerity, if you don't have that, I'm going to advocate for this child, and you may not like it, but I'm coming back again tomorrow because my child needs this service. I know it's closing time. I'm going to go home now, but I'll see you at 8:00 tomorrow because my child needs this. So Jenna, that was a beautiful description of the skill sets needed to help a foster child.
Well, I think that to both your points, Delois, it shows the tenacity and the support that you and everyone on your organization is working to support these kids and being that point of contact and being that support for them throughout this. And Jenna, yeah, absolutely right. Those are I'm so happy that you were called those things, because you need it. You are an advocate for your child, and it's so great to hear that the love and support and care that you show to them. So I want to talk now a little bit more about how we can support others now, like just as we change gears a little bit. So I want to ask this. I'm going to probably ask this one to you, Delois, about so if there's a family that really wants to help but isn't in a position to adopt themselves, what can that family do?
Oh, I've got two answers. I am excited about this question because there are many ways you can help. One of them is mentoring. We have a teen mentoring program. So if having a child live in your home overnight is a bigger commitment than you're interested in or available to do at this stage in your life, one of the things you could do is mentor. That is a program for teens in foster care that you are willing to fill out an interest survey, and then we'll match you with the youth that most closely matches your interest survey. And we will do our best to provide you all the support that you need to be a successful mentor. We give you 16 hours of training before we ever match you with someone, so that you can help them learn life skills that will prepare them for that time when they're no longer going to be in foster care. So if you think you'd be willing to donate 4 hours per month for at least 12 months working with one child, we would love to tell you more about our Youth in Transition program, which we frequently refer to as YIT. Another way you can help is if you decide, you know what, licensing for the long haul would not be something I'm capable of right now, but I can do temporary foster care. Then we'd love to tell you about respite care, where you are a temporary home to help a child restabilize before returning back. And so that's another type of way of helping. Neither one of those involve any type of adoption. So adoption is just one way to help. There are many others.
Great. Thank you so much, Delois. And Jenna, I have a kind of a similar question for you now, but how about, because of you've had so many different experiences, right? You've been adopted, your parents have adopted other children. My question to you is, how can we support those who are awaiting adoption? What are your thoughts on this? And do you have any organizations or support for those who are still awaiting adoption?
Yep. So like Delois had said before, Mayor has, a list of kids waiting. And if you contact, even a local agency, a lot of them will have giving trees, especially around Christmas time, trying to, make those kids have a normal Christmas while they're being bounced around. And one thing that we do is to give suitcases. So special suitcases, I've done princess, dinosaur, anything that kid can have that's personal to them, because a lot of these kids that I've had in my house, my parents have had, are taking trash bags, putting all their belongings, and you got to think inside internally how that would make you feel.
Sure.
So giving them a suitcase, and for the little ones, stuffed animals, something that gives the little bit of the stability while they wait.
Right. Well,
and another thing that often happens is families near the August timeframe donate backpacks with school supplies to agencies that serve children so that they can have those additional resources. So no matter what community you're in, you will find someone collecting backpacks around school time with school supplies in them. We have at Christmas time had a family adopt our agency in honor of their grandmother. And so the kids go to their peer groups. One is in high school, the other two are in middle school, and then they collect gifts from their peers and they bring it over to the adoption agency, and we take pictures of all the stuff they've collected, and then our staff distributes them to children during the Christmas time. So there are lots of ways to help besides adopting.
So Jenna, my next question's for you. What would you like to share with other families who are considering adoption?
It is so worth it. I will say that through and through, it is hard. It is not meant for people that will give up. But the second that judge bangs the gavel and you are stuck in, and the cool thing is that a lot of the times they let the child do it, which is a really memorable moment. And just knowing that their name is now your name, and that they are yours, and you no longer have to fight anybody to prove that. It's great. And seriously, you have people that will advocate for you while you're going through the process, because it's a minimum of 6 months in the state of Michigan. And that moment is so worth all of it. Trying to get to know them as they're living with you or transitioning, and watching them grow and finally feel safe with someone. It's an amazing feeling. And I will tell you right now that there's nothing like it.
And I want to add one of the things our agency does, because that is such a special moment. If the family is willing, adoption hearings are private. They're legally private, so the public is not invited unless it's adoption day. And then those families have consented during National Adoption Month. Typically in November, you'll have some adoption days where they're public. Excluding those limited occasions, adoption is always private. But if the family consents, we will send a photographer so that that moment where the judge bangs that gavel is forever captured in photographs of the smiles during the hearing, of the joy on the faces of the parent, of the excitement of the relatives who came from far and wide to be there at this moment, to be in the courtroom when the judge said, this is it, your family. And that way, you have a memento. We do a photo book that the families can go back and look at and remember that day they all became one.
Another great, thing that we did, which, is kind of a cool, like Delois was saying about photographs and memento. We had a page made by her worker to showcase how many days she waited for her family. And so I have a photo of her with the judge that banged that gavel and says, I waited 645 days in foster care and now I have my family.
Aw.
And that is, I can't even, just seeing that and thinking to yourself, 645 days to adults isn't a lot. It's just another life, You're just going through the motions. But to a kid,
Forever.
It's huge.
Right.
Forever, yeah.
Well, thank you so much for being here. I do want to ask one final question to both of you, and that would be, what is your final message to our listeners today?
Well, I'll start, if that's okay, Jenna. I would love to say, if you're not sure what adoption involves, if you're not sure, if we didn't give you enough information to create a clear picture of what becoming a licensed foster parent looks like, if you're not sure whether mentoring is for you or not, give us a chance to share more information. Either pick up the phone and call us on 989-839-0534 or check our website. There's lots of information. If it's 3 a.m, there's nobody gonna answer the phone for informational calls, but there's plenty of information on our website. And if you read that and you say, well, I'm still not sure, give us a call. We have an amazing staff. We are a nonprofit organization here to help improve the lives of children and families. So please give us an opportunity to answer your questions by either contacting us through our webpage or giving us a phone call. Thank you.
Thanks, Delois. And Jenna?
My final message would be that if you have that feeling in your heart where you know that you could do something, go to Google. If just like Delois said, call her agency. Adoption Option was wonderful for us, and my parents adopted through them too. And if you're not, like she said, into the adoption, you're not sure that that's what's right for you, there are so many resources. There just are, and those kids need us. They really do.
Great. Well, thank you so much, both of you, for being here today. I learned so much, and I hope our listeners did too. And I want to thank you both for doing so much for the kids in our community and for the kids that are in your family, and for sharing your story, because I know it's going to have a positive impact on others in our community as well. So thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
You can stay connected with the Visibility Project by subscribing, liking, and sharing on your favorite podcasting and social apps. Look for us at the Visibility PRJ.
Financial support is needed to keep the conversation going. Go to midlandfoundation.org/give and select the Cultural Awareness Coalition Endowment Fund to be part of the project. Note podcast in your donation notes.
Thank you for listening.
We see you.
We hear you.
And together, we are making a difference.